I found the letter by accident, tucked inside an old sketchbook I hadn't touched in years. Dear Clara, it began in my teenage scrawl. Don't let them steal your colors. My hands trembled as I read it, standing in my Seattle apartment, the words pulling me back to a girl I'd buried long ago. A girl who dreamed of painting the world, not fixing it for others. I'm Clara Bennett, 35, an interior designer who thought she'd outrun her past. But that letter, written when I was 16, was a warning and a spark. It arrived just as my family in Atlanta decided I was theirs to control again. Not for love, but for their own desperate needs. If you've ever felt your dreams slipping under someone else's weight, stay with me. This is how I fought to take them back. Roswell, Georgia, was my childhood, a suburb of Atlanta where oak-lined streets and brick houses hid secrets behind perfect lawns. Our home on Maplewood Lane gleamed red shutters. A porch swing, the kind of place you'd see in a Southern Living magazine. My parents, Evelyn and Robert Bennett, were pillars of the community church volunteers, hosts of Labor Day barbecues. But inside, the air was thick with unspoken rules. I was the older daughter, the one who carried the family's burdens. By 14, I was balancing school, a waitressing job at a diner, and my parents' expectations, while my sister Sophie danced through life untouched. Sophie, 5 years younger, was their pride, her mistakes forgiven with a smile. When she forgot her lines in the school play, Mom called it adorable. When I missed a curfew by 10 minutes, Dad's voice was ice. You're better than this. Clara, I learned early that love came with a price. I cooked dinners, mopped floors, kept the house running. While Sophie's piano lessons filled our evenings with off-key notes, I longed to paint, to capture the way Georgia's skies burned orange at dusk. But Mom's words were a wall. Art won't pay the bills. Clara, you're too practical for that. So, I hid my sketches, my heart, and promised myself a way out. High school was survival. I worked weekends, saved for college, and clung to a mantra, escape is possible. The University of Washington offered a scholarship, and Seattle became my haven. But even there, Roswell's shadow lingered. A memory haunted me. Sophie, 16, crying after a fight with Mom, begging me to stay home instead of leaving for college. I went anyway, and her tears became my guilt, a debt my parents never let me forget. Now, that debt was being called in, and the letter in my hands was a reminder of who I'd been before they tried to reshape me. I thought I'd built a life beyond their reach, a career, a home, a spark of creativity I was just beginning to reclaim. But families, even the ones we love, can weave traps we don't see until they tighten. What came next wasn't just a request for help. It was a battle for my soul. If you've ever stood at a crossroads, torn between who you are and who you're told to be, you know this fight. Keep listening, because this story isn't just mine, it's ours. The letter I found in my Seattle apartment wasn't just a relic, it was a mirror, reflecting a childhood I'd tried to outrun. Growing up on Maplewood Lane in Roswell, Georgia, I was shaped by a house that looked like a postcard but felt like a maze. The red brick facade, the crepe myrtles blooming pink in summer, the laughter from our neighbors' barbecues. It was a stage, and I was cast as the dutiful daughter, always performing. My parents, Evelyn and Robert Bennett, weren't monsters. They loved me in their way. But their love was a contract, and I was bound to its terms. If you've ever felt like your family's dreams were heavier than your own, you know the weight I carried. By 13, I was the family's backbone, though no one called it that. I'd come home from school, tie on an apron, and cook meatloaf, mashed potatoes, whatever kept the peace. The kitchen was my domain, not out of choice, but necessity. Sophie, my younger sister, would sprawl on the living room rug, sketching outfits for her dolls or humming pop songs. She was 10, her world free of the chores that tethered me. If I asked why she didn't help, Mom's voice was gentle but firm. "Clara, you're the steady one. Sophie's still finding herself." Finding herself, I was a kid too, but no one seemed to notice. Dad would pat my shoulder, saying, "You're keeping us together, kid," as if that was a prize. The imbalance went beyond chores. Sophie's whims were indulged ballet classes, a new bike, trips to Six Flags with friends. Me, I got hand-me-downs and practical gifts, a planner, a thrift store coat, tools to build a future I didn't choose. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, dreaming of painting the world storm clouds over Atlanta, the Chattahoochee River at dawn. Once, I showed Mom a sketch, my hands shaking with hope. She smiled, thin and dismissive. "Pretty, Clara. But you're meant for bigger things. Art's a distraction." My heart sank, but I nodded, tucking my dreams into a box I wouldn't open for years. School was my escape, but even there, the pressure followed. I worked weekends at Dixie Diner, serving coffee to truckers, saving every tip for college. My grades were perfect, not from talent, but failure meant staying in Roswell, trapped. Sophie flunked history, and Mom hired a tutor. No lecture needed. When I got a B once, Dad sat me down, his voice low. "We expect more from you." "Clara?" I swallowed the sting, vowing to prove myself, not to them, but to the girl inside me who still believed she could break free. There was a moment, though, that cut deeper than the rest. Sophie was 15, struggling with bullies at school. I found her crying in her room, her mascara streaked. "You're leaving for college soon," she whispered. "Who'll help me when you're gone?" I hugged her, promising I'd always be there. But I left anyway, chasing my scholarship to Seattle. That promise became my guilt, a seed my parents would later nurture to pull me back. They weren't cruel, but they were desperate to keep their perfect family intact, even if it meant breaking me. Roswell taught me to be reliable, but it also taught me to hide. I hid my anger, my dreams, my need to be seen. That letter, written when I was 16, was my rebellion, a plea to hold on to my colors, my spark. If you've ever felt like you're living someone else's life, like your own voice is locked away, you're not alone. I was that girl, and the fight to find her again was just beginning. Keep listening, because the spark I buried was about to ignite. Seattle was my rebellion, a city where I could finally paint my own life. After high school, I fled Roswell's chokehold with a scholarship to the University of Washington, my bags packed with dreams I'd kept secret. Those college years were a revelation, choosing my own classes, staying up late, debating philosophy in dorm rooms, sketching in coffee shops without anyone calling it a waste. I majored in interior design, a bridge between my love for art and the practical path Mom and Dad had always pushed. But in Seattle, it wasn't about pleasing them. It was about discovering Clara, the woman I could be when no one was watching. By 35, I'd carved out a life that felt like mine. My apartment in Capitol Hill was small, but alive, exposed brick walls, a corner filled with half-finished canvases, and a window framing the Puget Sound's restless waves. Mornings began with coffee and the hum of the city. Ferries cutting through the mist like ghosts. My job at Atelier Design was my pride. I crafted interiors for boutique hotels and quirky bookstores, blending textures and colors to tell stories in space. Clients called my work soulful, and I was building a name, not just a paycheck, For once, my effort wasn't a debt to someone else. It was a gift to myself. My friends were my anchor. There was Emily, my college roommate, who'd pull me into impromptu dance parties in her living room, laughing when I tripped over my own feet. Or Lena, a coworker who'd share quiet lunches, respecting my need for space without question. They saw me as Clara messy, driven, sometimes too serious, not as the fixer I'd been in Roswell. I hosted brunches, experimenting with recipes like smoked salmon frittatas, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Those moments, filled with clinking glasses and easy chatter, were proof I'd built something real. I'd started painting again, too, reclaiming the dream Mom had dismissed. My canvas's bold swirls of indigo and ochre captured Seattle's moods, rain-slicked streets, the glow of Pike Place at dusk. They weren't perfect, but they were mine, a quiet defiance of the girl who'd been told to be practical. I kept my family at a distance, visiting Atlanta only for quick holiday trips, always in a hotel, never Maplewood Lane. Mom's calls carried hints of guilt. "You're so far, Clara," but I'd deflect, keeping my life a fortress they couldn't breach. I thought I'd escaped, that Sophie's tears and Dad's lectures were locked in the past. But there was a crack in my armor, one I didn't see. That promise I'd made to Sophie at 15, to always be there, lingered like an unpaid debt. I'd left her to face Roswell alone, and though I'd justified it, the guilt gnawed at me. My parents knew it, too, and they were waiting for the right moment to tug that thread. The letter I'd found, written to myself at 16, was a warning. Don't let them steal your colors. I'd thought I'd heeded it, building this vibrant life in Seattle. But colors fade if you don't guard them. And a single spark from Roswell was about to test everything I'd made. If you've ever built a life you love, only to feel the past creeping back, you know this tension, the pull between who you are and who you're expected to be. Keep listening, because my fortress was about to face its first real siege, and the battle would show me what freedom truly costs. Rain drummed against my Seattle apartment's windows, a steady rhythm that matched the quiet of a Thursday night. I was sprawled on my couch, a sketch pad open to a half-finished design for a waterfront bistro. When my phone lit up, Evelyn Bennett. Mom's name on the screen was a jolt, like a cold hand on my shoulder. Our last call, months ago, had ended with her sighing about my distant life, her voice heavy with unspoken demands. I let it ring, my thumb hesitating. That old pull, the need to be the good daughter, tugged at me, even after all these years. I answered, bracing myself. "Clara, we need you," she said, her voice trembling, not with tears, but with something sharper urgency, laced with expectation. "What's going on?" I asked, setting my pencil down. The rain seemed louder, a warning. Mom paused, then let it out. "It's Sophie. She's pregnant. Clara, and she's alone. My sister, now 30, had always been a whirlwind chasing dreams, dodging consequences. The father," Mom said, "was a musician she'd met at a bar, gone the moment he heard the news. She's 6 months along, and she's struggling." Mom continued, "We're helping, but it's not enough. You have to come home." Home. The word landed like a stone. Roswell wasn't home. Seattle was my apartment, my paintings, my life. "I can visit," I said carefully, my voice steady despite the churn in my gut. "But I have work, Mom, projects, deadlines. I can't just leave." Her tone shifted, soft but pointed. "Sophie's hurting. Clara, you promised her you'd be there. Remember when she was younger, when she needed you?" The memory of Sophie's tear-streaked face at 15, begging me not to leave for college, flashed through me. Guilt, my family's favorite weapon, tightened its grip. Just a few days, Mom pressed, "You're the strong one. She needs you now." I wanted to say no, to hang up and let the rain drown out her voice. But Sophie's struggles were real, and despite the years, she was still my sister. I couldn't turn away, not completely. "I'll come for the weekend," I said, the words heavy. But that's it. I have a life here. Mom's relief was palpable, even through the phone. "That's all we ask, sweetheart. We'll see you soon." She hung up, and I sat there, staring at my sketch pad, the bistro's lines blurring. Why did it feel like I'd just agreed to more than a visit? I stood, crossing to my window, the Puget Sound a dark shimmer below, my apartment its canvases. Its quiet was my sanctuary, built brick by brick from the ashes of Roswell's expectations. I'd be there for Sophie, but on my terms. I rehearsed my boundaries, whispering them to the glass. "I'll help, but I won't stay. I'll care, but I won't carry her burden." The 12-hour drive to Atlanta loomed like a tightrope, one I'd walk with eyes wide open. But deep down, a whisper of doubt crept in. This wasn't just a favor, it was a summons, and I was stepping into something I couldn't yet see. If you've ever felt a call from your past, one that stirs both love and dread, you know this moment the choice to step forward, hoping you're strong enough to hold your ground. Keep listening, because what waited in Roswell wasn't just a family in need. It was a reckoning, and I was walking straight into its heart. The drive from Seattle to Roswell was a marathon. 12 hours of winding highways and my own churning thoughts. When I pulled into the driveway on Maplewood Lane, the house glowed under the Georgia sun-brick facade polished, front porch swept, crepe myrtles blooming like nothing had changed. But the air felt heavy, charged, as if the house itself was waiting. Mom, Evelyn, met me at the door, her smile too wide, her hug too tight. "Clara, you're here," she said, like I'd returned from a war, not a weekend trip. Dad, Robert, followed with a nod and a gruff, "Good to have you, kid." Their warmth was a performance, and I was already on edge, sensing the script I hadn't read. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and memory. Sophie lounged in the living room, her pregnancy rounding her frame, scrolling her phone with a half-hearted wave. "Hey, Clara, glad you made it," she said, as if I'd driven 1,000 miles for a casual brunch. Her nonchalance prickled, but I swallowed it, reminding myself I was here to help, not to fight. Dinner was a Southern ritual smothered pork chops, green beans, peach cobbler served with small talk about Atlanta traffic and my fancy Seattle job. But as Dad poured coffee, the conversation turned, deliberate as a chess move. Mom's voice softened, her eyes fixed on me. "Clara, we've been talking about Sophie's future." I set my fork down, pulse quickening. "Her future?" I asked, glancing at Sophie. "Who studied her plate?" Dad leaned forward, his tone measured. "The baby's coming, and Sophie's in a tough spot. We need to be a team." The word hung there, familiar and loaded. Mom chimed in, her words careful. "You've always been our rock. Clara, Sophie can't do this alone, and we thought, well, maybe you could stay. Just for a while. Stay." My chest tightened. "I have a life in Seattle," I said, slow and firm. "My job, my home, I can't just leave." Dad's smile was thin. "Your designs, you can do that anywhere. Family's what matters." Sophie finally looked up, her voice sharp. "It's not like you've got kids or anything. Clara, "You're free, free." The word stung, twisting my independence into a flaw. I pushed back, calm but pointed. "I'll help while I'm here, but moving back isn't an option." Mom's eyes glistened, not with tears, but strategy. "You promised Sophie you'd be there. Remember when she was younger, when she begged you to stay." The memory of Sophie's teenage tears hit hard, guilt coiling in my gut. Before I could respond, they pivoted, leading me upstairs with a cheerful, "Come see the baby's room." My old bedroom was unrecognizable. The walls, once scribbled with my teenage dreams, were now pale blue, adorned with cloud decals. A crib stood where my bed had been, a rocking chair in place of my desk. "Where am I sleeping?" I asked, voice hollow. Mom beamed. "The den's all yours. Honey, it's perfect. The den, a cramped, musty room off the garage. Its pull-out couch, a mockery of comfort." I turned to Sophie, searching. So, this was always the plan. Me here. In the den, silence. Dad cleared his throat. "It's temporary. Clara." "Until Sophie's on her feet. Temporary." The lie was flimsy. That night, in the den's dim light, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about a weekend. They'd rewritten my role caretaker, not sister without a word to me. But the real blow came the next morning, over breakfast. Mom, stirring her coffee. "Let slip. We told Pastor John you're moving back to help Sophie. He's so proud." My spoon clattered to the table. "You what?" Dad shrugged, unapologetic. "People talk. Clara, we said what's true for the family. True they'd spread a story to the community, chaining me to their narrative before I'd even unpacked. Then, a worse discovery. While grabbing a charger from Dad's study, I found a notepad, Mom's handwriting scrawled across it. "Clara's income daycare. Costs, mortgage, help my breath caught. They weren't just after my time. They needed my money to prop up their crumbling finances bills I'd glimpsed, tucked under papers, hinting at debts they'd never admitted. They hadn't asked me to stay out of love, but desperation. Their perfect Roswell life, a facade cracking at the seams. I was their fix, their sacrifice, and they'd planned it all while smiling to my face. The betrayal was a quiet knife, slicing through years of loyalty. If you've ever seen your family's love revealed as a transaction, you know this ache not loud, but deep. A wound that shifts how you see everything. Keep listening, because their next move would push me to a ledge, and the choice I made there would change it all. The Roswell sun hung low that Sunday, casting golden streaks through the living room windows on Maplewood Lane. Mom had transformed the space for Sophie's baby shower, draping it in soft pinks and gold's gauzy curtains. A table piled with gifts, a banner proclaiming, "Welcome, little one." The air buzzed with chatter from aunts, cousins, and church friends, their voices mingling with the clink of punch glasses. I moved through the crowd, refilling drinks and stacking gift bags, my smile a mask. Inside, I was unraveling. The weight of Mom's words, Pastor John's pride, their plan for my income pressing against my ribs. I was here to help Sophie, but every moment felt like a step deeper into their trap. The gift opening was in full swing when Aunt Ruth, her voice carrying over the hum, leaned toward Sophie. "So, darlin', what's next after the baby arrives?" Sophie, glowing in a floral dress, smoothed her hands over her belly and smiled. "I'll take some time with her. You know, get that mom vibe going. Then Clara's gonna step in, handle the heavy lifting so I can ease back into work." Heads turned, eyes pinning me where I stood, a tray of cupcakes wobbling in my hands. "Step in?" Cousin Ellie asked, her brow creasing. "You mean, like, move back from Seattle before I could speak?" Mom swooped in, her voice honeyed but firm. Clara's choosing family. Bless her heart. She'll be here, raising the baby with us, putting Sophie first. It's what sisters do. The room warmed with approving nods, murmurs of, "How sweet and such a good girl." Aunt Ruth reached for my arm, her grip soft but heavy. "Giving up that big city life for your niece. That's sacrifice, Clara!" My throat closed, the cupcake sliding on the tray. Sacrifice I hadn't chosen this. They'd scripted my life in front of everyone, their words a cage snapping shut. I set the tray down, my voice low but steady. "I haven't agreed to anything. I'm here for the weekend, that's all. My job, my home. They're in Seattle." The chatter stilled, a dozen gazes sharpening. Sophie's eyes welled, her lip trembling, genuine or not. I couldn't tell. Mom laughed, high and brittle. "Oh, Clara's just tired from the drive. She's already planning to stay, aren't you, honey?" "No, I'm not," I said, louder than I meant, the words cutting through the silence like glass. The room froze, punch glasses mid-sip, faces caught between shock and discomfort. I never said I'd move back. I have a life I built, and I'm not giving it up. Sophie gasped, a hand to her chest, as if I'd struck her. "So my baby doesn't matter to you," she whispered, tears spilling. Mom rushed to her side, glaring at me. "Let's not ruin this, Clara. We're celebrating." But the celebration was over, the air thick with unspoken accusations. I stood there, heart hammering, their stares a weight I couldn't shake. They'd turned me into the villain, and I'd played right into it. After the guests left, the house turned cold. In the kitchen, Mom scrubbed dishes with a fury, her voice a hiss. "You humiliated us, Clara, making us look like liars in front of everyone." I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. "You lied. Mom, you told them I'm moving back, giving up my job, my home." "You don't get to decide that Dad stepped in," his eyes hard. "We're not deciding, Clara. We're asking you to do what's right. Sophie can't handle this alone, and you owe her. Owe her." The word hit like a slap, dragging up that old promise, Sophie's tears at 15, my guilt for leaving. Sophie, wiping her eyes, added, "You're so selfish. Clara, my kid needs a family, not your stupid designs. My designs are my career." I shot back, voice shaking. "I'm not your nanny, Sophie. This is your life, not mine." Mom's face crumpled, but her words were steel. "We thought you understood family. Clara, after all we've done, you'd turn your back on us." Then came the truth, raw and unfiltered. Dad's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "We told Sophie's doctor you'd be her support system. We said you'd stay, help with the baby, maybe chip in for the house. We need you, Clara, and you're letting us down." Chip in the notepad in Dad's study flashed in my mind mortgage, debts, my income as their lifeline. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding my life, my dreams, my everything, all wrapped in the guise of love. I stared at them, Mom's trembling hands, Dad's clenched jaw, Sophie's accusing eyes, and saw the truth. This wasn't about family, it was about control, about using my guilt to keep their world from crumbling. Something broke inside me, not with tears, but with a quiet, fierce resolve. "I'm done," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. They blinked, startled, thinking I'd caved, but I hadn't. I was done playing their game, done letting their needs erase mine. I turned and walked to the den, their voices fading behind me, knowing I'd just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. If you've ever faced the moment where love turns into a leash, where the people you care for demand your soul, you know this breaking point. It's not loud, it's a shift, a spark that says, no more. Keep listening. Because what I did next wasn't just an escape, it was a reclamation, and it would redefine everything. The den's air was stale, the pull-out couch creaking under me as I sat in the dark. The house on Maplewood Lane silent except for the faint hum of Roswell's night. Mom's accusation, Dad's confession. Sophie's tears, they swirled in my head. Not as guilt now, but as clarity. I wasn't their savior, I was their sacrifice, and they'd planned it all along. The letter I'd found in Seattle, my teenage plea to keep my colors, burned in my mind. I'd built a life in Seattle, my paintings, my designs, my freedom, and I wasn't letting them steal it. By dawn, I had a plan, not a reckless sprint, but a calculated map to reclaim my life. Every move had to be invisible, because one misstep could trap me here forever. I started with my anchor, my job at Atelier Design. At 3 a.m., I slipped my laptop from my duffel, its glow hidden by the den's heavy curtains, and created a new email account, one Mom's prying eyes couldn't find. I wrote to my boss, Laura, the subject line, Stark Emergency Confidential. I requested a video call at 7 a.m., knowing she'd be up early in Seattle. Next, I checked my bank accounts, my pulse steadying as I saw no unauthorized access. I transferred 80% of my savings to a new account at a bank, unlinked to Atlanta, leaving just enough in my old one to avoid suspicion. My passport, a USB with my design portfolio, and my grandmother's locket small. Irreplaceable pieces of me went into a zipped pocket of my bag. I'd take only what I could carry without raising a brow. At 5 a.m., I showered, dressed in a crisp blouse, and walked into the kitchen with a practiced calm. Mom, sipping coffee in her robe, looked up. Early start, she asked, her tone hopeful, like I was settling in. Work call, I said smoothly. Big client pitch. I'll need quiet, maybe head to a cafe. She nodded, pleased, thinking I was playing her game. Be back for brunch. Dear, I'm making biscuits, she said. Can't wait, I replied. The lie easy now. I drove to Brood Haven, a Roswell coffee shop with mismatched chairs, and no one who'd know me. There, over a shaky Wi-Fi connection. I met Laura on a video call. Her face, usually bright, darkened as I told her everything. The baby shower, the financial scheme, the guilt they'd weaponized. Clara. This is manipulation. Plain and simple, she said. You don't owe them your life. I can't lose this job, I whispered, my voice catching. Laura leaned closer to the screen. You won't. We're expanding to Portland small office. Big potential. You could spearhead it. We'll cover a month's housing to get you started. Portland, a fresh city, far from Roswell's reach. A place they'd never look. I'm ready, I said, a spark igniting. Laura promised HR would send contracts to my new email. Discreetly. Step 1 was secure. Next, I called Emily, my college friend in Boise, her number a lifeline in my prepaid phone. I need you, I said, keeping my voice low. No one can know. I spilled the truth, the shower, the debts, the trap. Emily's voice was fierce. My couch is yours. Clara, get here tomorrow. I'll cover for you. I exhaled. Grateful. I'll tell them I'm running errands. Then I'm gone. Thank you. She softened. You're brave. You know that. But be careful. I nodded, though she couldn't see, the weight of her trust steadying me. I moved fast. I reserved a storage unit in Boise, prepaying online for 6 months. A quick call to my Seattle landlord confirmed my lease was intact. Mom's doctor story hadn't reached them, but I arranged for a mover to pack my apartment into storage, just in case. The hardest part was the den. I couldn't empty it, not without alerting Mom, but I needed my essentials. When Sophie mentioned needing diapers for the baby shower's gift table, I saw my chance. "I'll grab them," I said, too eager, then added, "and some work supplies from Office Depot. Might be a bit—" Mom handed me a list, oblivious. "Don't dawdle, Clara. Sophie's counting on you." I drove to a bank in Sandy Springs, opening a second account and shifting the last of my funds. I bought a burner phone, a precaution if they tracked my main one. At a Walmart, I grabbed basics clothes, a backpack, toiletries, stashing them in the Boise storage unit I'd access tomorrow. The diapers were my final stop, a prop to sell the lie of a dutiful sister. Back at the house, I leaned into the role. I helped Mom set the table, laughed at Dad's golf stories, even sketched a nursery mural idea with Sophie. My hand steady despite the storm inside. Maybe a forest theme, I suggested. My voice light, while my mind counted hours to freedom. That night, I proposed a board game, a rare suggestion that delighted Mom. We played Scrabble, their laughter a strange echo as I memorized their faces, Mom's crinkled eyes, Dad's half smile, Sophie's distracted grin. This might be the last time I saw them. Maybe ever. In the den, I wrote a note to Sophie. My words careful, "I love you, but I can't live for you. I hope you find your strength, like I'm finding mine." I hid it in her sketchbook, a place she'd find later. I packed my backpack, laptop, locket, a single canvas from Seattle, leaving the rest to sell the illusion I'd return. As dawn broke, I lay awake, the plan a pulse in my chest. I wasn't just leaving, I was choosing myself, my colors, my life. If you've ever had to slip away from the ones who claim to love you, you know this quiet courage, the kind that grows in the dark, ready to bloom. Keep listening. Because the moment I stepped out that door, my fight for freedom took a turn I never expected. Portland's skyline shimmered through my apartment window, a mix of steel and evergreens under a late summer sky. I'd been in the city 3 weeks, settling into my new role at Atelier Design's Portland office. My days filled with client sketches and the hum of a life I was rebuilding. The corporate apartment, sparse but functional, felt like a fresh canvas mine to paint. I thought I'd left Roswell's grip behind, that the 12-hour drive and my careful escape had cut the strings. But families, I learned, don't let go so easily. And their next move wasn't a plea or a phone call. It was a legal hammer, aimed straight at my freedom. It came on a quiet Wednesday. A knock at my door as I sipped tea and reviewed a hotel lobby design. A courier, stone-faced, handed me a manila envelope, its weight heavy in my hands. I tore it open, my breath catching as I scanned the first page. A legal notice from an Atlanta law firm, filed by Evelyn and Robert Bennett, my parents. The claim intentional infliction of emotional distress and breach of familial obligation. They accused me of abandoning Sophie, now 7 months pregnant, and causing severe psychological harm to the family by leaving without notice. They demanded I return to Roswell, assume caregiving duties for Sophie's child, and pay $8,000 in damages for their legal costs and Sophie's lost stability. A handwritten note from Mom was tucked inside, her script sharp. "Clara, we raised you to be better. Come home before this gets worse." My knees buckled, and I sank onto the couch, the city's glow fading outside. A lawsuit. From my own parents, the words blurred abandonment, duty, harm, each one a twist of the knife they'd wielded my whole life. They'd taken my silence at the baby shower, my forced calm, and spun it into a contract I'd never signed. The note's guilt trip, cloaked in love, was their old playbook. But this was new. a calculated escalation to chain me back to Maplewood Lane. For a moment, I doubted myself. Had I been selfish, had I hurt Sophie, left her to drown? But then I remembered her entitled glare, Dad's notepad listing my income, Mom's lies to the church. This wasn't about love, it was about control. I called Emily in Boise, my voice shaking as I read her the summons. They're suing me. For not being their nanny, their bank. She was silent, then fierce. This is insane. Clara, they're trying to scare you into submission. You need a lawyer. Today. Her certainty steadied me, and by morning, I was in the office of Rachel Nguyen, a Portland attorney with a reputation for cutting through family disputes like a blade. Her office, lined with books and a single orchid, felt like a fortress. I poured out the story, the nursery, the baby shower, the financial scheme. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she read the filing. "This is harassment dressed up as law," she said. "The claims are weak, but they're banking on you folding under pressure. We won't let them." Rachel drafted a cease and desist letter, sharp and unyielding, listing their actions, spreading false stories to Pastor John, manipulating Sophie's doctor, and now this baseless lawsuit. It warned of a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress if they didn't withdraw. We sent it certified, along with proof Mom's texts to my Seattle friends calling me unstable. Dad's email to a colleague hinting at my mental break, gathering those hurt, each screenshot a reminder of their betrayal. But Rachel was clear. Evidence is your shield, Clara. The process was grueling, late nights reviewing documents, my savings dipping for legal fees, my sleep fractured by nightmares of a courtroom dragging me back to Roswell. Weeks later, the response came. The lawsuit was dropped, the Atlanta judge dismissing it as without legal grounding. Rachel's letter had worked, forcing my parents to retreat. But the victory was hollow. I'd spent money I couldn't spare, and the emotional toll lingered, a shadow over Portland's bright days. They'd tried to cage me again, using the law to twist my guilt into chains. Yet standing firm, fighting back, showed me something new. My freedom wasn't just a place. It was a choice. One I'd defend no matter the cost. If you've ever had to fight for your right to exist, to prove your life is yours, you know this weariness, the kind that comes from battling those who should love you most. Keep listening. Because what I found next, in a Portland art studio, wasn't just escape. It was rebirth. Portland's mornings wrapped me in a quiet embrace. The city's mist curling around my apartment like a secret shared. I'd been here a month. My days at Atelier Design's new office, a whirlwind of fabric swatches and client calls. My nights spent piecing myself back together after the lawsuit's sting. The victory over my parents' legal gambit had kept me free. But it left scars, sleepless hours, a bank account bruised by legal fees, and a lingering question: who was Clara, now that I'd fought so hard to stay her my Seattle paintings, stacked in a corner, whispered an answer. I'd always found truth in color, in the sweep of a brush, and I needed that truth now more than ever. One rainy afternoon, I wandered into the Alberta Arts District, drawn by a chalkboard sign outside a studio, "Paint your soul, all levels welcome." The words hit like a dare. Inside, the space smelled of acrylics and cedar. Its walls a riot of canvases, bold abstracts, timid landscapes, each a voice. The instructor, Nora, a woman with ink-stained fingers and a warm smile, handed me a brush. "No judgment here, Clara," she said. "Just let it out." I stood before a blank canvas, my heart pounding. What was I feeling? Anger at Evelyn and Robert? Grief for the sister I'd lost in Sophie? Hope for the life I was building? I dipped the brush in crimson and slashed it across the canvas, a wound, a beginning. Week after week, I returned, each session peeling back a layer of myself. I painted Roswell's suffocating oaks, their branches clawing at a bruised sky. I painted Seattle's Puget Sound, its waves a dance of freedom and loss. One night, I painted the letter I'd found, my teenage plea to keep my colors, the words swirling in gold against a storm of black. Nora paused by my easel, her eyes tracing the canvas. "This is alive." "Clara," she said, "you're saying something real." Her words cracked something open, a dream I'd buried under Mom's dismissals and Dad's expectations. Painting wasn't just a hobby, it was my voice, one I'd silenced too long. Nora urged me to submit a piece to a community art show, a small event at a local gallery. Doubt gnawed at me, Mom's voice. Art's a distraction, echoing, but I chose a painting, a chaotic blend of blues and golds, a storm breaking into light. I called it Unbound, the night of the show. I stood among strangers, my heart in my throat as they studied my work. A woman in a red scarf lingered, her eyes soft. "This feels like a fight won," she said, buying it on the spot. I slipped into the gallery's back room, tears falling not from pain, but from a quiet triumph. My art had spoken, and someone had heard. Painting became my lifeline. I filled my apartment with canvases, shared sketches on a quiet Instagram account, each post a step toward the girl who'd written that letter. I joined Nora's weekly classes, made friends with artists who saw me, not as a fixer, but as Clara, the woman who painted her truth. Art didn't erase the past, but it gave me a way to hold it, to transform it into something beautiful. If you're carrying wounds you can't name, find your outlet paint, write, sing, anything that lets your soul breathe. It's not about perfection, it's about claiming a piece of yourself no one can touch. My family's shadow still loomed, but a faint shift was coming, a whisper of change I didn't expect. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself piece by piece, you know this fragile hope, the kind that grows when you choose your own colors. Keep listening, because what came next wasn't just healing, it was a new beginning. Portland had woven itself into my bones, its rainy streets and vibrant art scene, a canvas for the life I was painting. My apartment in the Alberta Arts District was no longer just a place to sleep. It was a home, alive with my touch. Canvases leaned against walls, their colors bold and unapologetic, while my balcony caught the city's pulse, its lights flickering like stars I could finally reach. At Atelier Design, I'd grown into my role, leading projects that turned empty spaces into stories, my designs earning whispers of awards. My friends Nora from the art studio, Lena from work, Emily visiting from Boise filled my evenings with laughter over coffee or quiet walks through Forest Park. This was my life, built from the ashes of Roswell's expectations, and I guarded it fiercely. But the past doesn't vanish. It lingers, like a half-forgotten song. My old phone sat in a drawer, its voicemails a record of Evelyn and Robert's fading demands, Sophie's tearful pleas. I didn't listen, not yet, but I couldn't erase them either. Emily, my anchor, checked the messages. Her updates brief. "They're softer now," she'd say. "Less guilt, more confusion." I'd nod, focusing on my new rhythms, morning sketches, late-night client revisions, moments of painting that felt like breathing. Yet a part of me wondered if I'd lost my family for good, or if there was a way to hold them without losing myself. 8 months after the lawsuit, a letter arrived, not a summons, but a simple envelope, Sophie's handwriting on it. I opened it in my kitchen. the scent of fresh coffee grounding me. "Clara," she wrote. "I named her Ella. She's 4 months old, and I'm drowning, but I'm trying. I see now why you left. I leaned on you too much." No apology, but a weight, an acknowledgement that shifted something in me. I sat with it, talking it through with my therapist, Dr. Harper. "What do you want from them?" she asked. I didn't want Roswell's cage, but I missed the idea of family, not the one that trapped me, but one that could exist on my terms. I replied to Sophie, my words careful. "I'm glad you're finding your way. Tell me about Ella." "I'm here, but differently." We started emailing, short and tentative. Sophie sent photos of Ella bright eyes, a tiny hand clutching a crayon. Mom and Dad joined in, their messages stripped of the old venom. Dad wrote about his new woodworking hobby. Mom shared a recipe for peach cobbler, no strings attached. I kept my distance, choosing texts over calls, Portland over Atlanta, last month, during a video call. Sophie held Ella up, her babbling filling the screen. "She loves colors," Sophie said, a shy smile breaking through. "Like you." I smiled back, imagining a day I might show Ella my paints. But only when I was ready, on my ground. This journey wasn't about escaping, it was about claiming myself. Not as the dutiful daughter, but as Clara, artist, designer, woman with dreams as valid as anyone's. And here's what I've learned. Lessons carved from this fight. First, draw your line. Name what you won't accept guilt trips, demands on your time, and hold it firm, no matter who's asking. Second, build your tribe. Find people like Emily or Nora who see you, not what you can do for them. A therapist, a friend, even a stranger in an art class can be your lifeline. Third, feed your spark. For me, it was painting, but yours might be writing, running, or planting a garden. Find it, protect it, let it grow, and finally, face the storm. Whether it's a lawsuit, a confrontation, or your own doubts, stand tall. You don't have to win every battle, but you have to show up for yourself. I'm on my balcony now, Portland's skyline alive with dusk's glow. My latest canvas drying inside a burst of color, a storm finding peace. This life, my life, is mine because I chose it, fought for it, painted it. If you've ever felt your dreams slipping under someone else's weight, I see you. What's the line you've drawn? The spark you've fed, share it below. Because your story matters. Thank you for hearing mine. Here's to building a life that's yours. No apologies needed.